Hello, hello, hello. My name is Robert. I am the recovery guy, and you have entered into The Fix. Hello, hello, hello. My name is Robert, and I am the recovery guy. I am so excited about today's podcast. Today, I have my very dear friend, Justin B. in studio with us, and we are excited to have him together with us. So what I'm going to do is Justin and I have, we've sort of set up some of the three areas that we want to cover with you today. And what I'm going to do is have Justin introduce himself, and then we'll launch into the conversation regarding recovery. So Justin, say hello to the crowd.
Hello, crowd. Hey, Robert. I'm so honored to be able to be back with you again and recording with you. You and I have a long history and a varied history of recording together in lots of different places, and I'm super excited to be with you. I am a child of an all-powerful, perfectly loving God and a recovering addict, living, like I said, in the miracle of one day at a time recovery. And my primary addiction is a sex addiction, and I'm grateful to be in recovery, working recovery actively since September of 2013, and it is a miracle to stand here today. Actually, I'm sitting here today, but I'm to be here today sober and living in this wonderful life called recovery. You and I, as I mentioned, we've recorded together a lot. We've done something with your podcast. We've also done many things on the RICO 12 platform, which is I'm this lucky enough to be the steward over the RICO 12 platform. We've got our RICO 12 speaker meeting, RICO 12 Big Book Roundtable, noodled out with Nikki, and you and I and a few other people have done the Ask It Basket over the last several years, and I just love doing that. And if anybody wants to look into RICO 12, that's RECO12.com, and you can find out all about the stuff we do there. So anyways, There's a little bit about me. I'm grateful to be here, Robert.
Yeah, and I'm excited. Before we launch into the questions, our topic of conversation, what day? Now, you're live on Friday, right?
Yeah, I do a live speaker meeting on Friday on Zoom, and that can be attended by anybody.
Okay, great. And they can just go to RICO12.com to get all that information, anything that they would need to listen and to correspond.
And they can also. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
Yeah, they can also send me an email at RICO12pod@gmail.com, RECO12pod@gmail.com to correspond there also.
And one thing that's interesting about you, and I learned so much from your podcast, is where I'm primarily alcohol, sometimes a little bit of drugs, but talk about recovery at large. You entertain people across a broad spectrum of recovery, right? I mean, sexual addiction, alcoholics, drug addicts, Al-Anons. It doesn't matter if you're in recovery, potentially they're going to be on your show one time or another, or at least that's a question. Is that correct?
Absolutely. We are open to all addictions, afflictions, manifestations of the disease of alcoholism, the illness of alcoholism. Anybody who's actively working a 12-step program in whatever fellowship is welcome to come join us, is welcome to be a speaker, and is welcome to share their experience, strength, and hope on the commonalities of addiction and recovery.
Yeah, and also to submit questions for your speakers and for your areas of influence. How would someone reach you that way? Would they just email you from your website at RICO12.com, or what would they do?
Yeah, if someone wants to be a speaker or submit questions for us to address, send me an email at RICO12pod@gmail.com, and we'll get you in the meeting. We'll get those questions addressed, whatever that looks like. Happy to accommodate that.
Yeah. Well, one thing that really interests me, Justin, is over the years that you and I have become closer as friends, and we share the common goal of helping others recover from a behavioral or substance abuse addiction, is that even though you're a primary member of SA and me a member of AA, we follow a similar path, if not identical path sometimes, because I hear you quote the big book, left and right, the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. So our means to recovery is almost identical, and yet there is some differences between us. I'm a substance and in your behavior, but that's where the differences end, don't they?
That's what I've learned. I used to think that I was special, and that the manifestation of alcoholism in my life was unique because of I'm a sex addict. I'm a process addict is what that looks
Okay.
like.
Yeah.
Sex, food, whatever it may look like. But I've learned that the root of all of those problems seems to be common. Selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of all our problems. And it goes deeper than that. But that's what I've learned.
Well, from your experience, the three things that you and I want to discuss today is why is complete and total surrender to the addiction so necessary for recovery? Why is the thoroughness of cleaning house so essential to bring about recovery? So what is the foundation? What is the action to bring about recovery? And then let's talk about, as we both know, the steps 10, 11, and 12, where we take a personal inventory, we improve that conscious contact with God, and we attempt to serve others in step 12, which is really common between our groups, our approach to recovery. We're the same when it comes to that. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think it's very similar in the process. The 12-step process works the same for pretty much everybody that I've ever talked to if they are thorough and in taking the steps and working the program. And what I'm tempted to do is to work my program the way I want, but in doing that I'm not surrendering to the addiction. I'm not surrendering to my higher power in that, and I'm trying to keep something to myself. So I need to be willing to do whatever it takes, even if it's different than something that I would choose to do on my own.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about surrender, because surrender, gosh, in AA and people that I've heard over my length of journey, they say, I have heard that if you don't surrender in step 1, the likelihood is you'll never get well. You'll never get to step 12 if you don't surrender. You'll quit before you ever get to step 12 if you do not surrender in step 1. Do you find that universal? I have found that to be true. From your vantage point, for where you see and who you speak with and the circles that you walk in, what has been your experience with complete and total surrender? I know complete is a relative term, but why do we find that so essential as a foundation to recovery?
I agree with you that it seems to be universal that if somebody recovers and experiences the happy, joyous, and free that is promised to those who are in recovery, it is because they first just said, you know what, I'm powerless over alcohol, drugs, sex, food, gambling, whatever it is. My life has become unmanageable, and I just have to say, you know what? My best thinking got me to where I am today. It's not going to get me anywhere else. I have got to surrender completely and allow someone else's, preferably a higher power of mind's thinking, to take me to that next level and just say, you know what? I don't got this.
Yeah.
The first time anytime I hear "I got this" come to my mind, that's a big red flag that I've got to go, okay, where am I taking my will back? Where am I not being surrendered at this time? What do I need to do to remedy that?
Yeah, and that is admitting that powerlessness. Why do we think that admitting to the unmanageability of our life? Because I want to think that we're okay. So I drink a little bit too much. So I go to this strip club or engage in that negative sexual behavior, or I lose a paycheck. I still under control because I can still make up for it somewhere. Why do we have to admit? Why is it essential to admitting the second half of that first step, that our life had become unmanageable?
Man, that's a hard one to get to also, Robert. I think that for me, the reason why I have to admit that is because even though, and I'm going to steal a line from one of my buddies in recovery, I have a pretty high opinion of my own opinion. But like I said, that opinion got me to where I was when I came crawling into the rooms of recovery. And I tried everything to make that happen. I have to look at my life and say, even though I may have a roof over my head, food on the table, I may still have family gathered around the table at meals, but I'm absent. I'm not there. And the unmanageability of my life brought it to where, had I continued on that path, I may not have a roof over my head today. I may not have food on my table. I may not have a wife and kids around that table. if I continued on that path. I've seen that happen way too many times in my fellowship and in all these different fellowships where not admitting the unmanageability leads to just further destruction and chaos.
I like that answer a lot because it does lead to further destruction and chaos. Just like I'm powerless over whatever our addiction is, whatever our propensity is to self-destruct, that my life had become unmanageable. One of the mistakes I made when I first came into the rooms, I would listen to others and I would hear their unmanageability as they would tell their story. And I think, well, what are you doing here? I'm worse than you. And then I would hear somebody else share and I say, oh my God, you did that? You did that? Maybe I'm too good for these rooms. So we have to own our own unmanageability, don't we?
Absolutely. And I totally identify with that, Robert. I mean, when I first came into the rooms, I looked around. Well, first of all, I thought when I was going to walk in, I was going to see all these people in trench coats that were just, looking like they had come off
Peep
the
Show
street.
or whatever. Yeah.
Exactly. And then when I walked in, I saw people that looked a lot like me. Some had higher bottoms, some had lower bottoms, but it was really easy for me to go, whoa, you did that? Well, at least I'm not that bad. I guess maybe I don't belong here. Or, really, that's why you're in here? I totally identify with that. And I think it's important, like I said earlier, to go into these things. Well, maybe not go into it, but soon enough recognize but for the grace of God go I. No matter how deep and dark that person's bottom is, man, if I'm not willing to say I don't got this and turn my will and my life over to that power greater than myself, I will be there. I will be there.
Isn't part of our, like you mentioned earlier, you had very high opinion of yourself. A friend of mine said the ego's job is to convince me it doesn't exist. And so I'm looking, I don't get to AA or any other room of recovery because it's a bright sunny day. I'm usually in there because my marriage is falling apart. I can't hold a job. I have nowhere to live. I have no more friends. I have brothers and sisters, siblings say, get away from me, or a combination of therefore. I don't get there because I'm a good guy. I get there because my life is upside down or something has been threatened to be taken away from me if I don't get better, if I don't, it's not because I'm a good guy. So I have to stop being so critical of others on one side or the other. I just have to look at me and focus on me and why I'm there. Father Martin says something interesting. He talks about a guy who goes before a therapist, a psychologist, and says, well, I haven't done this, I haven't done that, this hasn't happened, and that hasn't happened. And Father Martin, the psychologist's response was, well, you've told me all the things that haven't happened to you. Let's look at the things that have happened to you as a direct result. And I think that's a good approach. What's actually happened to me? What's driven me to the rooms? Not what's driven you, but what's driven me. And that helps me understand how unmanageable my life has become. Do you recognize that at all?
I do, absolutely. And I was just looking over here at my wall. I have quotes from all sorts of people all over the place. And I can't find this one, but I know it's on this wall and not this wall. But it says something like this. I have yet to meet somebody that flew into the rooms of recovery on wings of eagles.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen. We're all at our bottom, whatever that is. And what you mentioned there is I have to focus on why am I here? Not why is that guy here or that girl there. It's why am I here? What has happened? What choices have I made in my life that have brought me to this place where I no longer have a choice and that I'm in here? And when I'm able and willing to look at that honestly, and I recognize that there is a problem, the problem's me. And guess what? According to all these people that are in this circle with me in this room, there's also a solution, and something can change, something can work. And that brings me hope when I finally grasp the fact that I'm in here because of my own disaster in my life, not because of his or her disaster.
Well, which leads us into step 2, that states, came to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. And I think that's why we have to recognize how unmanageable a life had become in order to grasp how insane because the insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Everyone has heard that. If you've been to 5 recovery meetings, you've heard that before. Isn't the second half of step 1 the springboard for step 2? Have you found that to be true in your recovered life?
I think so. If I admit the unmanageability of my life, I think that's the same thing as saying, yeah, I'm insane. I've been trying all these different things and my life still isn't together. And the launching into step 2 of, well, I hope there's something out there that will restore this sanity or bring sanity for the first time, maybe.
Yeah, and isn't that our first, because we can leave step 1 feeling rather hopeless, and step 2 is that glimmer of hope, is that light at the end of the tunnel. We're hoping it's not a train, right? But it's that light at the end of the tunnel or the middle of the tunnel, wherever we're at in our journey, that says, okay, now you've admitted to your depravity, and depravity comes in all different forms and all different addictions, whether you're gambling a paycheck like I did in Las Vegas, whether you're at the strip club and you're just out of money and they're ready to kick you out and you have nowhere to go, or you're sitting in the bar and you not only don't have any more money, but you can't afford to pay the bartender on a Friday like you said, and just things start unraveling. In a way, step 2 is rather intimidating, and yet it offers a glimmer of hope that we haven't felt in a very long time, right?
Absolutely. And I think there's a common saying in the rooms, step 1 is the I can't. I'm admitting that I can't. Step 2 is he can, someone can, something can. There's a power that can. And then step 3 is the I will let that power. But that what you mentioned there, the light at the end of the tunnel, the hope that is there. As I look at that, I think, okay, the light at the end of the tunnel is the hope. The faith is the willingness to look up at it and trust that it's not an oncoming train. And the works, because faith without works is dead, is standing up and taking one step at a time towards that light. But the step 2 is the hope that, maybe there is a way out, and maybe these people around me that seem to have found it are people that I can latch onto and follow in that way.
Yeah, and doesn't hope make you hungry for those things to happen? I mean, it made me hungry for, okay, if I can be restored to sanity, what else is there for me? And that's what it did for me. That's what it did to me in terms of seeing the opportunity as recovery is. Even though I felt the way I felt in the moment, it allowed me to get out of that moment and project how things could be if I was. And fortunately for me, in my recovery in Las Vegas, and I had some incredible mentors in my 39-year journey along the way that took me to places in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous that showed me how life could be if I was willing to do a step 2 that was grounded in step 1. Does that ring a bell to you?
Yeah, absolutely. It does, Robert. And I think that you mentioned something, that hope that there's something ahead for me in life. And I don't remember exactly how you worded that, but I want to step back and take a glimpse from where you and I were. Let's talk about me. 13 years ago. Yeah, about 13 years ago, 12 and a half, 13 years ago, when I stepped into the rooms for the first time, I was a defeated man. There wasn't hope. But when Benjamin grabbed me and said, "You are in the right place and I will see you back next week," I was a little bit angry when he said that. But at the same time, I thought, hey, this guy approached me and said, "You're in the right place. I'll see you back next week." And there was just a little bit of hope. And I thought, I guess as much as I didn't want to go back the next week, I did go back the next week. And then I saw a little bit more hope. And where I am today, I still pinch myself and say, how did things change so much in 12 and a half years from where I was then to where I am now? And what is that going to look like in another 12 and a half years? Only God knows, but man, is it a fun ride.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned only God knows, because that's going to segue us right into step 3, which is became willing to turn our will and our life over to the care of God as we understood God, as we understood him. And a lot of us, I included, as screwed up as it was searching for God. I just was searching in the wrong place with the wrong motive. So let's talk about step 3, because a lot of times newcomers make the mistake, and this has been true in my journey in the rooms I've been in, and let's talk about your journey as well. Newcomers make the mistake of thinking that they need to know who God is. We know who he isn't, but we don't know who God is along the way. We don't know who God is along the way. So you come from a religious background, and I dabbled
Yes.
a lot in various religions, whether it was on, the Sunday morning TV evangelist or going to church with my wife, trying to fill that hole that was in me. Let's talk about that spiritual journey that starts with just becoming willing.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned I come from a religious background my whole life. And this concept of becoming willing, I thought I was willing my whole life, but I was so rigid, so stuffed up by what I thought my religion meant and what I needed to do and how I needed to be perceived and everything, that I wasn't willing. I was only willing to do what I put in this little tiny box that was named my religion. And when that stopped working, I had to say, whoa, what else is there? How else is there? Why else is there? And be willing to look outside of that little tiny box that had been, I thought, saving me my whole life, but had been really tripping me up. Does that make sense?
It really does. And I think we put on a spiritual robe that we don't even know if it fits. We just put it on because we think that's what you want from me. So, so often when I go into treatment centers and you work with newcomers and along your journey, how important do you think it is to let a person know that all you need to do in step 3 is become willing? You don't need to know who God is. That's going to change. That's going to evolve. That's going to get bigger in terms of who God is in your life as he demonstrates, as the big book says, his omnipotence in our life. How do we get the person, because a lot of people relapse based on their own, what they feel is an expectation of step 3. That's really not an expectation. It's just becoming willing. I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired in step 1. I don't think I have to live this way forever in step 2. And I think since I don't have to live this way, I might as well let someone else control my life, right? Isn't that what step 3 is about?
I think so, yes. And I love the verbiage in the step, God as we understood him.
Yes.
It's past tense. How I understood God, how I understand God right now at this moment should be different than I did 10 minutes ago. I should be continuing to understand God a little bit more, a little bit better as I make that decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understood him. Now, the willingness part of it, man, in the big book, in We Agnostics, it talks about those of us who are atheist or agnostic.
Yeah.
This was a hard sell. I add in the word or religionist. Someone who is so bent on religion and their own way, my own way of seeing things. It's a hard sell to do that and say, look, you got to be willing to see things differently and ask whatever power may be out there. Reveal yourself to me just a little bit, what I need today, so that I can, in the beginning, stay sober, so that I can wake up in the morning and get to work on time, so that I can, whatever it is that I need to do, I just need to ask for that power sufficient for that day, and trust that, be willing to trust that it's better than what I was doing on my own.
So we've surrendered in steps 1, 2, and 3. In my understanding, the sooner we can get to cleaning house, the better, so we don't take our will back in steps 1, 2, and 3. I believe that we need to fall in love with steps 4 through 9, which is the total house cleaning with ourselves, with others, revealing ourselves to God, making amends to such people. Let's talk about them as one step, because they're actually a continuation. 4 is the inventory step. 5 is the admitting step. 6 is the asking step of God removing the defects of character. And then we humble ourselves in step 7, that God would remove the shortcomings. And then step 8 and 9, which are partner steps, talk about trying to go outside of ourselves and make some amends to people that we've obviously harmed, whether it's a spouse, whether it's a parent, whether it's an employer, whether it's the law. It varies for every single one of us. Some have a sketchier path than others. Our children, right? How important is cleaning house soon after because a lot of people, and I will say this, a lot of people put off step 4 because they want to, because they don't want to get to cleaning. They don't want to get to admitting. We've already admitted in steps 1, 2, and 3. But if my life is not mine anymore and I'm not in charge, what's the hesitation with steps 4 through 9? Does that make sense?
It does. And I love what I've heard fairly recently. Steps 1, 2, and 3 are the connection. Step 2, I connect with God and realize, well, maybe God can do this. Step 3, the last, am I giving my will and my life to God so that I may be of help to others, self, God, others. And then the steps 4 through 9, I love how we're going to talk about this in one continuous thing. I see that as the correction steps. I'm correcting things that,
that's
yes,
good.
I've made connection. Now I need to correct things so that those connections can maintain, build, and flourish into something bigger than anything I ever thought. Because in step 4, I identify, wow, here's some messy things I've done. Here's some patterns in defect. I identify defects of character by seeing patterns in selfishness, self-centeredness, fear, whatever else I'm identifying as I do that, what the root of those things are. Then I admit it. And as I've identified it, I then become willing to give them to God. I ask God to take them. And then I go make things right with the people on that list. And I'm correcting the things that are blocking from myself. Any additional thoughts on that, Robert, as I'm walking through that?
I think it's important to point out that step 4 from Alcoholics Anonymous include taking inventory of my sexual relation, which, SA is just about being twisted in a sexual fashion. And I think, and you and I talked about this offline before, I think not every sex addict has a problem with alcohol, but you give an alcoholic enough time, they're going to have a problem with sex on one level or another, relationship wise, communication wise, sexually. It's in step 4, sexual relation. And that's a stumbling block for all of us. But we have to look at all those things, because if I clean part of my room and I sweep some of the dirt under the rug, is my room really clean? And step 4, 5, 6, and 7 is about cleaning that room thoroughly, and how important that is. Matter of fact, in step 5 of the big book, in the 12 and 12, it talks about, if I don't do a thorough step 5, I probably won't recover.
I agree with that. And I'm going to share a little practical history of my life. Back in a previous version of my life, the first 11 years of my married life, I worked for the phone company. I was an outside technician, climbed telephone poles. I got in manholes and utility holes in the street. And I worked on repairing and maintaining and installing telephone systems. One of the jobs when going into a manhole, a utility hole in the street, is you've got to muck it out. Sometimes if it rain and mud will get down in there, and you've got to get the water and mud out of there. You've got to scrape it out. You got to dry it out. You got to sweep it out before you open up the telephone cases, or it's going to cause a big mess of everything. And step 4 and 5 is the mucking out of the manhole, getting in there and just cleaning it out, getting it all ready so that the work in steps 6 through 9 can be done in a manner that won't cause more problems.
Yeah, I like that a lot. It's like a storm drain that needs to be cleared.
Absolutely. Yes.
And step 4 and 5 are certainly clearing that storm drain out. 6 and 7, we're entirely ready after we find out that's why these steps can be done, in my opinion, in my experience, and according to the big book, as I understand it, can be done almost right after the other. Who wouldn't be after I realize how bad my inventory was? For me, I have to own it. Why wouldn't I be entirely ready to have God remove the defects? Why wouldn't I be so humbled? Remember, I turned my will and my life over to the care of God, in step 3, and I'm humbling to remove these shortcomings. And matter of fact, it's one thing I understand from Joe and Charlie, who are on Everything AA, some of the greatest instruction I've ever received. I listen to them 2 times, 3 times a week before I go to bed at night. And Joe and Charlie talk about how Bill Wilson, the co-founder of AA, would use different words to describe the same thing. So step 4, inventory. Step 5, admitting the wrongs, right? Step 6, the defects of character. And step 7, the shortcomings. They're all the same thing. The inventory, the wrongs, the defects, and the shortcomings, they're all the same thing. You can call them whatever you want to call them, but they're all the same thing. So it's just a continuation and a progression of writing them down, admitting them, asking God to remove them, and then being humble. The key is not shortcomings in step 7, it's humbling ourselves. We humbly asked Him to remove the shortcoming. Prior to that, we haven't asked God for anything. But step 7 is the first opportunity we have to humble ourselves before our higher power and say, I know what my shortcomings are. Would you please remove these shortcomings from me? It's very important for me to go on to get that done. Would you agree?
Yes, absolutely. I can't go on until I've identified what I'm going on from.
Yeah.
Or I'm just swimming in mud. I'm not making any progress. I've got to clear it out, identify what it is, ask for it to be removed, and then as it is removed one moment at a time, I can move forward into the next steps.
Yeah, and talk about the next steps. Steps 8 and 9. I tell people all the time, don't be worried about step 4. If you want to be worried about anything, be worried about step 5. And I tell the people the same thing, others the same thing. If you're going to be worried about steps 8 and 9, don't be worried about step 8 because you're just making a list. Be worried about step 9 where you have to go. It's the action part of step 8 because all we're doing is making a list of all persons we harm. And once again, became willing, like we were in step 3, became willing to make amends to them all. So now things are getting real. So now I'm just not going to this invisible, all-knowing but invisible God who sees in the dark, which is kind of scary in itself.
Yeah.
But I'm going to a real person. I'm not just saying, God, I'm wrong. You're in the universe somewhere. You're not going to punish me because you love me. You created me. Now I've got to go to my ex-wife. Now I've got to go to my employer and told him I was a thief or what I did, or go to my parents and say, I did this, I did that, I sold out of my mom's purse, whatever our baggage is. We have to go face these people now. That can be rather intimidating, but we've already got a taste of what cleansing is like in steps 4 through 7, right?
Yeah, and I love how you talked about, if you're going to worry about anything, worry about step 9. But one thing that I typically tell my sponsees is they voice, I'm scared of step 4. I'm scared of step 8 and 9. I'm scared of step 5. I say, you're on step 1. Don't worry about that right now. If you thoroughly follow these steps, when you get to those places, it doesn't mean you won't be fearful.
Yeah.
There will still be some fear, but you'll be willing at that point. And it won't be as scary. Still fearful, but not undoable.
I like that a lot. And let's talk about, as we progress in the rest of the time we have together today, let's talk about step 10. And I'm going to read step 10 because I say it a lot in meetings. And this is just my understanding of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. People ask me how many step 4s I've done or how many step 5s. I tell them 1 because I do step 10 every day. So step 10, it says, which suggests we take a personal inventory and continue to set any new mistakes and write any new mistakes as we go along. We vigorously commence this way of living as we've cleaned up in steps 8 and 9, cleaned up the past. We have entered the world of the Spirit. Our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. This is not an overnight matter. It should continue for a lifetime. And if you want to continue reading that, it's page 84 of the big book. Continue for a lifetime. And I want to make sure that, every day, aren't you continuing to turn your will and your life over to the care of God as you understood God? Isn't that relative to the person? Isn't that grown? Aren't you more ready to admit your faults? Aren't you more ready to be humbled before God? How does step 10 help you continue steps 1 through 9, or certainly steps 4 through 9?
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly that step 10 is a continuation and a culmination of the
Yeah,
first nine
good word,
steps that I do
culmination.
every day. And I may be seen as a heretic or as as somebody that's a 12-step heretic in this, but when I pick up a new sponsee, I start them on step 10, day one. We
Really?
go to page 84 and we read that paragraph.
Uh-huh.
And I say, we're going to commence this way of living as we go along, because what we're doing here is I'm making it, we're not going to clean up the past right now. We'll get to the past as we move into it. But today, I want to minimize the damage you are doing to people starting today, so that when we get to step 4, the stuff that you did today doesn't have to show up on step 4, because you will have made amends for it. You will have tried to make things right for it as you went along. And, that's, for me, that's a really powerful way to house clean. Like I said, it may be heretical in some people's eyes, but man, it's been really powerful for me as I try and practice this as I go along, and grow in understanding and effectiveness. So
Yeah, that's good. I like that. And if that's it, you're not sidestepping step 1. You're just letting them know that from today you can stop this damage. We're going to look at damage that you have done, but today you can begin to making good decisions. I don't think anyone we call anyone who would argue with that is probably a bleeding deacon that they talk about in the 12 and 12. My sponsor, Slow Will, happy, grateful, recovered alcoholic, 45 years sober. He says, step 10, if we clear away the wreckage of our present, it doesn't become the wreckage of our past. And I
yeah,
love that as a way of just the best way to keep my room clean, just like Sir Isaac Newton said in the 1600s or 1700s, whatever. He said, things that are in motion tend to stay in motion. So I want to stay in motion spiritually, practically, physically. So I'm always moving. I'm always looking for an opportunity, because I know I'm a better version of me when I clean up after myself, right?
absolutely. And I am a better version of me when I clean up after myself as I go along.
Yeah.
Yes, it's great to clean up the past, and that has to be done in steps 1 through 9. It absolutely has to be done. And as I clean up the present, like Slow Will says, I don't have to continue cleaning up the past. When I get caught up to today, I just clean up today. I don't
Yeah.
have to worry about yesterday anymore.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful thing. And another part of step 10 that I really want to dive in on with this is continue to watch. And that's
Yeah.
what I'm trying to teach these newcomers. Hey, you've never watched yourself. The only thing you've ever watched is you've watched the ladies around you. You've watched, whatever. You're only paying attention to other people. I want you to watch yourself here. Watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. And when these crop up, identify them right now.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard to do that initially, but it's so important to be able to build that skill and that ability to identify that. Because if I'm not watching, I won't know what to pray for, which is step 11. I got to watch so I can know what to pray for.
You bring up something important. There's about, I don't know, 4 people in my life that I'm accountable to. One is my son, Rob. One is obviously God. One is Laura. And the other is my sponsor, but I'm also accountable to my sponsees. So accountability, because a lot of times my ego, as we've identified, doesn't want me to see things that would go against my ego. And so asking people, and I act, how am I doing in an area that I'm accountable to you? And how am I doing as your dad? How am I doing as your husband, as your best friend? How am I doing as a representative of my sobriety? And my sponsees, how am I leading you? Am I consistent with what I say and what you see me do? And then, of course, God gives me the ultimate rest because he knows everything. He can see everything. He's omnipresent, omnipotent, all those things. Do you find that accountability important in step 10?
Yes, and I think that's where the daily, I actually think the principle of step 10 is or should be called daily accountability.
Yeah,
It's
that's
so
good.
vital to be aware of what's going on, whether it's in real time or whether when I reflect back on it at the end of the day before I close up my day, before I go to bed, or as it says here, when we retire at night. As I'm doing that, I look back at the day and, okay, where was I not accountable? Where did I harm somebody, or where did I not live up to what I feel I should have been doing or could have been doing? And I identify it and I become accountable to myself. And that's step 10. I pray and become accountable to God. And then I become accountable to others in my in my step 12 work the next day and trying to do a little bit better in those areas.
You know, in the 10 minutes we have left, I've gone over the normal podcast time, but it's so important to have this conversation with a recovered member in the rooms. Let's talk about step 11 in conjunction with where we start in step 2 and step 3, as we're taking baby steps in faith. Step 11 reads, sought through prayer and meditation to improve, not establish, but improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for the knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. So we give up power. We admit our powerlessness in step 1 to regain power in step 10, but only as we improve, because I think there's a direct connection. As I improve that conscious contact with God, my higher power, my power is increased. How is your journey there?
You know, as I look back at my journey so far, and we'll see where it continues from here, but steps 2 and 11 are the two most powerful steps for me. And it's because of, one, making connection with that power in step 2, a connection that I had never before made through decades of my life. And step 11, as I strive to continue to improve upon that conscious contact, that connection, and seek further light, further information, further power to do whatever I'm being guided to do. And it's just such a powerful, how do I want to say this? Improving my conscious contact is a one day at a time thing, just like staying abstinent, being sober, getting in recovery is one day at a time. It's a one day at a time thing. And I am so grateful for the fact that the God of my understanding, how I understood him yesterday, continues to evolve, and I understand God better each day as I strive.
You know, which I think step 10 reminds me of my humanity. Step 11 is a fulfillment of God. And step 11 also gives me the direction of helping others, because every monotheistic religion of the world encourages me to make a difference in somebody else's life, right? Whether it's Muhammad, whether it's Buddha, whether it's Christ, we all need to share our faith, and our faith becomes whole. So step 11, I can't do step 11 without a direction, and that direction is step 12, where I'm practicing the principles, right? I recognize that spiritual experience, that spiritual awakening, and I automatically share the message of hope, because, you know, we've seen people, Justin, you and I have seen people who have walked away from the rooms and their life would be forever unrealized, or they take their own life, or they end that relationship unnecessarily, where we are a message of hope. So sharing that message is essential to the completion of step 11. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And I think this goes back to, you know, when we first talked about steps 1, 2, and 3 being the connection steps. I connect with myself, I connect with God, I connect with others in the end of step 3. Step 10, 11, and 12, I think, are the direction steps. I've got to see where I'm going in step 10 so that I can have direction. Seek direction in step 11 so that I can help others in step 12. Self, God, others. Just like in steps 1, 2, and 3. But I do have to seek that guidance in order to be of use. You know, if I need to take action. If I know something, if I learn something and I don't do anything about it, all that knowledge in the world is doing me zero good, and it's doing others zero good. I have to put it into action, but I have to know what it is that I put into action. And that's where step 11 comes in, seeking that guidance and direction.
And then at the end of step 12, we shared the message. And then what we do, nowhere is this step about me. I need to practice the principles in all my affairs. So it's like climbing a ladder. I can't get to rung 12 from rung 5. I can't get to rung 5 from rung 3. I have to go 1. OSHA, they've had it on the side of the ladder, I have to climb 1 rung at a time to get to the top. Stephen Covey says something very important, and this is where good mentorship really has been the cornerstone of my recovery. I'm recovered because I've done what others who've instructed me have done, and they were right. Stephen Covey says we climb the ladder of life and we realize we're leaning against the wrong wall. How important is good mentorship, has good mentorship, as we find in step 12, been for your recovered life?
It has been absolutely excuse me, it has been absolutely vital. I've had some great sponsors, and I still have a great sponsor, but I am so grateful for others like you, Robert, that I call a recovery mentor who brings additional, improves my conscious contact with others in addition to improving my conscious contact with God, gives me additional light and information on things that help me do that. Seeking mentors in recovery has been vital for me and has opened my eyes. Like I said, steps 2 and 11, without people that weren't my sponsors but were mentors, it wouldn't have been the mind-blowing experiences that it has been in my recovery. So I encourage people out there, yes, have your sponsor, follow your sponsor's direction. Let your sponsor be the primary person that points you to God, but be open to hearing what others are saying and learn about that and their experience.
Well, thank you for being a part of the show. As we previously discussed, we talked about surrender, how that is necessary to overcome our addiction, the importance of cleaning house, and then the necessity for doing steps 10, which is the personal inventory, continuing to take that, trusting God in step 11, and then working with others, serving others in steps 12. So I've recently, just so you know, obviously recoveryguy.org, Recovery Guy podcast, and I've recently consolidated my names on Instagram and YouTube to be Recovery Guy 1986. So if you want to find me, you can find me across those platforms. Justin, one more time, how do people reach out to you?
Go look for reco12.com, RECO12, like recovery12step.com, and you can connect with me there.
Wonderful. Justin, it's been too long since you and I have had a conversation on this channel, and I really appreciate your time today, and I wish you and your family all the best. You've been a great friend. Thank you for being a part of the show.
Thank you, Robert.
All right. And remember, folks, we get broken apart, but we get whole together. Have a great day. Thank you for being a part of this podcast. Take care.